There are names in the Bible that echo through the halls of history. Names like Moses, David, and Paul. Their stories are etched in our hearts and minds, and their legacies continue to shape our faith. But there is one name that often goes overlooked, despite the profound role she played in the divine story of Israel. Her name is Asenath, the Egyptian wife of Joseph, and the mother of two tribes that would carry the promise of God into the future, Manasseh and Ephraim. How is it possible that a woman from a land steeped in idols, raised in the worship of the sun god Ra, became the mother of two of the most significant tribes in Israel? How could God choose someone like Asenath, an outsider, a foreigner, to fulfill his divine purpose? Her story is one that's largely forgotten, but perhaps that's exactly why it's worth revisiting. What if there's a deeper truth hidden within her silence? Could it be that God chose Asenath not in spite of her Egyptian roots, but because of them? What does this story teach us about God's grace, his power to redeem, and his ability to use anyone, no matter their past, for his divine purposes? In this video, we'll explore the life of Asenath, the forgotten wife of Joseph, and uncover the lessons her story holds for us today. We'll dive into the profound significance of her role in Israel's history and how her transformation reflects God's redemptive power. Through her, we can see that no one is beyond God's reach, and that his plans are always greater than we can imagine. As we walk through Asenath's journey, ask yourself, could God be calling me to a role greater than I ever thought possible? What part of my life has he already redeemed for his purpose, even if I can't yet see it? Let's begin this journey together and open our hearts to the lessons God wants to teach us through the life of this seemingly forgotten woman. As we continue to explore the remarkable life of Asenath, we're faced with a striking reality. God's plans are often more expansive and mysterious than we can comprehend. Asenath, a woman born into a culture of idol worship, is not just a footnote in the grand story of Joseph. She is an essential part of the divine narrative chosen by God to bring forth two of the most significant tribes in Israel's history, Manasseh and Ephraim. But why would God, in his infinite wisdom, choose someone like her, a woman raised in Egypt, the daughter of a pagan priest, steeped in the worship of the sun god Ra? The answer lies in the boundless grace of God, who can take anyone, no matter their past or their circumstances, and use them for his higher purpose. Asenath's transformation from an Egyptian idol worshipper to the mother of two patriarchs of Israel is nothing short of miraculous. It reveals God's ability to redeem the most broken of lives and turn them into vessels of his divine plan. Just as God used Asenath to bring forth Manasseh and Ephraim, he can use us to bring forth fruitfulness, even when our pasts are less than perfect. God doesn't look at our backgrounds or our shortcomings. He looks at our hearts and our willingness to be part of his story. Consider Joseph for a moment, a man whose own life was marked by betrayal, suffering, and hardship. Joseph, through all the pain, remained faithful to God. His loyalty, even in the depths of prison, did not waver. And it was through this unwavering faith that Joseph rose to power in Egypt, second only to Pharaoh. This is where Asenath enters the picture, an Egyptian woman, daughter of Potipharah, the priest of On, placed by Pharaoh in Joseph's life, not just as a wife, but as an instrument in God's plan. Why was this marriage, seemingly arranged for political gain, actually a divine setup? God, in his wisdom, saw the potential in this union, bringing together two seemingly disparate worlds, Joseph's faith in the one true God and Asenath's background steeped in Egyptian polytheism. This union, which on the surface might have seemed like a mere political alliance, was part of something much greater. Through Asenath's marriage to Joseph, God wove together a tapestry of redemption that would lead to the birth of Manasseh and Ephraim, two sons whose names would carry deep spiritual significance. Manasseh's name means, "God has made me forget my trouble," and Ephraim's name means, God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. These names were not just labels, they were declarations of God's work in Joseph's life and the healing of his soul. Joseph had endured immense suffering, and yet, through God's grace, he was able to find healing and restoration. Ephraim's name especially speaks to the idea that even in the midst of hardship, God can cause us to flourish. Even in the places where we once suffered, God can make us fruitful. This brings us to an essential lesson in the life of Asenath. Transformation is possible, no matter where we start. Asenath was a woman of pagan origins, but she was transformed by the grace of God. She witnessed the unwavering faith of Joseph, and through him, she found her own faith. God's redemptive power is not limited by our past. It is greater than any of our mistakes or failures. Just as he transformed Asenath, he can transform each of us, no matter how distant we may feel from him. The power of God's grace is such that it reaches even the most unlikely of people, even those who may have been steeped in a life of idolatry and sin. Asenath's life teaches us that God can redeem anyone, no matter where they come from. Asenath's story also reveals something essential about forgiveness. Joseph, who had been betrayed by his own brothers, forgave those who had wronged him and moved forward in faith. His forgiveness was not just an act of kindness, it was a declaration of divine healing. Through Joseph's example, Asenath saw the power of forgiveness and the freedom it brings. When Joseph forgave his brothers, it was a moment of healing, not only for him, but also for his entire family. And in Asenath's own transformation, we see the same power at work, the power to forgive, to heal, and to move forward in God's grace. In the lives of Manasseh and Ephraim, we see the fulfillment of God's promises. These two tribes, born of an Egyptian woman, were destined to play a pivotal role in Israel's history. Ephraim, the younger son, was chosen by God to carry the greater blessing despite being the second-born. Jacob, in his old age, crossed his hands and placed the right hand on Ephraim's head, declaring that he would be greater than Manasseh. This reversal of tradition is a powerful reminder that God's ways are not our ways. He does not operate according to human expectations. He is sovereign over all things, and his plan often defies our understanding. Ephraim's blessing speaks to God's ability to take the unexpected and make it great. It reminds us that God can take what seems insignificant and use it for his glory. This powerful act of blessing carries with it a lesson for us all. In our own lives, we may feel like we're not the ones chosen for greatness. We may feel overlooked, forgotten, or unworthy of God's calling. But Ephraim's story reminds us that God often works through the most unlikely people. It was Ephraim, the younger son, who became the father of a mighty tribe. And so it is with us. God's greatness is not bound by our age, our past, or our position in life. He chooses whom he will use for his glory, and he delights in using those who are humble and willing to trust in his plan. As we reflect on Asenath's life and the legacy she left behind, we are reminded that God works in mysterious ways. The quiet faithfulness of Asenath, the unseen role she played in the redemption of Israel, is a testament to God's ability to use anyone for his divine purposes. We may never know the full extent of our impact in this world, but like Asenath, our obedience to God's calling can leave a lasting legacy. And just as God used her to bring forth two powerful tribes, he can use us to bring forth fruitfulness and blessing in ways we may never fully comprehend. As we consider the lessons of Asenath's life, let us remember that God is not bound by our past or our circumstances. He sees the heart, and he is always working, even when we can't see it. Just as he chose Asenath, an Egyptian woman, to fulfill his divine plan, he has chosen each of us for a purpose, one far greater than we can imagine. In times of doubt and struggle, remember that God's grace is enough. His plan is greater than our understanding, and his ability to redeem and restore is beyond measure. This story challenges us to open our hearts to the possibilities of what God can do with our lives. It calls us to trust in his plan even when we don't see the way forward. Just as he transformed Asenath, he can transform us. Just as he blessed Joseph, he will bless us. And just as he used a foreign woman to shape the future of Israel, he can use us, no matter our background, to shape the future of his kingdom. All we need to do is trust in his grace, surrender to his will, and be open to the incredible journey he has in store for us. As we step into the life of Asenath, we begin to witness something that echoes throughout the entire Bible, a story of radical transformation. God, in his infinite wisdom, chooses the most unlikely people to fulfill his purpose. Asenath was not born into a lineage of faith. She came from a land filled with idols and false gods. She was the daughter of Potiphera, the priest of On, a place of sun god worship. Yet in the divine tapestry that God was weaving for Israel, Asenath was a key piece. Her story is not just about her marriage to Joseph. It is about redemption, transformation, and God's ability to turn any life into a vessel for his purpose. When we look at Joseph's life, we see a man whose journey was marked by betrayal, hardship, and suffering. Sold by his brothers, falsely accused, and thrown into prison, Joseph's faith never wavered. In the darkest moments of his life, God was with him. Joseph's unwavering trust in God's providence led him to become the second most powerful man in Egypt. And then, Pharaoh, recognizing Joseph's wisdom, gave him a wife, Asenath. Here, we see a divine union, one that defies human understanding. A Hebrew man, faithful to the one true God, married to an Egyptian woman, a priest's daughter, raised in a culture of idols. Why did God orchestrate this marriage? Why bring together two people so different in their beliefs and backgrounds? It wasn't just a political arrangement, it was God's plan to bring forth two tribes that would shape the future of Israel. Manasseh and Ephraim, Joseph's sons by Asenath, would carry on the legacy of faith that began with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Their names were not mere labels, they were declarations of God's work in their lives and in the lives of their descendants. Manasseh means, God has made me forget my trouble, a reminder of Joseph's healing from the pain of his past. Ephraim, meaning God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction, speaks to the incredible power of God to bring fruitfulness in the very places where we once suffered. Asenath, though not mentioned often in the Bible, played a crucial role in this divine plan. God didn't need her to have a perfect past. He needed her heart, willing and open to be part of his greater purpose. The lesson here is clear. No matter where we come from, no matter how far we've strayed, God can use us for his glory. Asenath's life was marked by idols, yet she was chosen to be the mother of two great tribes of Israel. It's a powerful reminder that no one is beyond the reach of God's redemptive love. If God can use someone like Asenath, then surely he can use each of us, no matter our past. The story of Joseph and Asenath also highlights the power of forgiveness and grace. Joseph, despite the unimaginable betrayal from his brothers, forgave them, and this act of forgiveness wasn't just an act of kindness, it was a declaration that God's grace is greater than any hurt. When Joseph forgave his brothers, he didn't just heal his relationship with them, he healed his own heart. He was free from the pain and bitterness of the past, and in that freedom, he was able to walk in God's purpose for his life. In the same way, Asenath, witnessing Joseph's grace, must have been profoundly impacted. It is not hard to imagine that as Joseph walked in God's forgiveness and love, Asenath was drawn into that same grace. We don't know when exactly Asenath's heart was changed, but we can imagine that she saw the power of God at work in Joseph's life, and through him, she was transformed. Like so many others in the Bible, she was not perfect, but she was open to the work of God in her life. This is a powerful lesson for all of us. God doesn't require us to be perfect to use us. It's not about our past or the mistakes we've made. It's about our willingness to be transformed by His love and grace. God can take any life, no matter how broken, and use it for His glory. He took Asenath, a woman raised in a land of idols, and used her to bring forth two of the most significant tribes in Israel's history. This speaks to the boundless reach of God's grace. No one is too far gone for His love to touch. As we continue to reflect on the significance of Asenath's life, we can't ignore the fact that God often works in ways that we don't understand. His plans are not bound by our expectations or our traditions. When Jacob blessed Joseph's sons, he crossed his hands, placing the greater blessing on Ephraim, the younger son. This act defied cultural norms and expectations. In the eyes of the world, Manasseh, the older son, should have received the greater blessing. But God, in His sovereignty, chose Ephraim to be the greater. This act of blessing speaks to God's ability to work outside of human expectations. His ways are higher than ours, and His plans are greater than we can comprehend. This moment of blessing, where Jacob crossed his hands, was not just a reversal of tradition, it was a prophetic act that changed the course of Israel's history. Ephraim's tribe would become one of the most influential in Israel, producing great leaders like Joshua, the man who would lead Israel into the Promised Land. This was God's divine plan at work. The younger son, the one least expected to lead, would become the one to carry Israel forward. This lesson reminds us that God often chooses the unexpected, the overlooked, and the underestimated to fulfill His divine purposes. He does not operate within the boundaries of our understanding. He calls the unlikely and makes them leaders in His kingdom. Ephraim's story also teaches us about divine favor and the power of blessing. Joseph's blessing over his sons was not just a ritual. It was a declaration of God's promise to His people. It was a moment when the future of Israel was sealed through God's spoken word. Blessings have power. When spoken with faith, they carry the authority of God's will. Ephraim's blessing was a prophetic act that shaped the future of Israel, reminding us that God's word, when declared in faith, has the power to change the course of history. As we look at Asenath's life, we can see that she too was part of God's divine blessing. Though her story is not told in detail in the Bible, her legacy lives on through her sons. She was not just a wife or a mother, she was a key player in God's redemptive plan for Israel. Her role may have been quiet, but it was vital. God used her despite her past to fulfill His promises. This is a reminder that no matter how insignificant we may feel in the grand scheme of things, God has a purpose for each of us. Just as He used Asenath to bring forth two tribes, He can use us to bring about His purpose in the world. The life of Asenath teaches us many lessons about grace, redemption, forgiveness, and divine sovereignty. It reminds us that no one is beyond God's reach, that He can take anyone, no matter their past, and use them for His glory. Just as Joseph forgave his brothers and rose to power, so too can we rise above the pain of our past and walk in God's purpose for our lives. Just as Asenath's life was transformed by God's grace, so too can our lives be, if we are willing to trust in Him and walk in His love. God's plan for us is far greater than we can imagine, and He is always at work, even in the most unlikely of places. As we close this chapter of Asenath's story, let us remember that God works in mysterious ways, and His plans are always greater than our own. His grace knows no bounds, and His love is always available to those who seek Him. If Asenath, an Egyptian woman from a world of idols, could become part of God's divine plan, then there is nothing in our lives that is beyond redemption. God is always at work, and we can trust that He will use us in ways we cannot even yet understand. All we need to do is trust, believe, and walk in His grace. As we continue to reflect on the life of Asenath, a deeper understanding of her role in God's divine plan begins to emerge, one that stretches beyond her marriage to Joseph or her identity as the mother of two tribes of Israel. Asenath's life is a powerful testament to the transformative work of God, not just in a single individual's heart, but also in the unfolding of God's larger story. The fact that Asenath, a woman born into a pagan culture, was chosen to be part of God's redemptive plan is not merely an interesting historical fact. It's a message of hope for every one of us. It speaks to the truth that God can take anyone, from any background, and use them to fulfill his divine will. One of the most profound aspects of Asenath's story is how it reflects God's ability to redeem and transform lives. We're often quick to judge people based on their past, their upbringing, or the circumstances they were born into. But God's vision for us is not constrained by our past. Asenath, the daughter of an Egyptian priest who worshipped idols, was brought into a marriage with Joseph, a Hebrew man who had been faithful to the one true God through years of suffering and hardship. At the time of their marriage, it was not a union of faith, but of divine orchestration. Pharaoh saw the union as a political move, a way to strengthen Joseph's position. But God had something far greater in mind. This union between Joseph and Asenath became the birthplace of two great tribes in Israel, Manasseh and Ephraim. Why is this important for us today? It's a reminder that God's work often happens in the most unexpected places. Asenath, a woman raised to honor the sun god Ra, was chosen by God to mother the descendants who would carry his covenant forward. Her story challenges us to look beyond external appearances and into the heart of the matter. God's ability to take what seems unworthy or unholy and transform it for his glory. No matter where we've come from or what our past holds, God is still able to use us. This is the heart of redemption, the transformation of the unredeemable, the purification of what is broken. Think about Joseph's story for a moment. Joseph was thrown into a pit by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused of crimes he didn't commit, and imprisoned in Egypt. His life was full of suffering and injustice. Yet throughout it all, Joseph remained steadfast in his faith. Even in the lowest moments, he believed that God had a purpose for his life, and God did not disappoint him. Joseph's faithfulness opened the door for God's blessing, not just for him, but for an entire nation. His ability to forgive those who betrayed him, his willingness to serve God even in Egypt, and his wisdom in interpreting Pharaoh's dreams were all pieces of God's plan unfolding. And in the midst of this, God placed Asenath in his life, not just as a wife, but as the mother of two sons who would carry forward the legacy of God's covenant with Israel. This act of forgiveness by Joseph is another key element that ties back to Asenath's story. Forgiveness is the pathway to healing, and it was through Joseph's forgiveness that the healing of his family and ultimately of the nation began. It wasn't just the forgiveness of his brothers, it was a forgiveness that allowed him to move forward in God's purpose. This is the kind of forgiveness that God calls us to offer to those who have wronged us. It's not just about setting ourselves free from the bitterness and pain of the past. It's about stepping into the divine purpose God has for us. Joseph was able to embrace his destiny because he forgave. And Asenath, seeing the grace Joseph extended to his brothers, was likely touched by this same grace, which may have led her to embrace the God of Israel. The power of forgiveness and grace cannot be overstated. When we forgive, we allow ourselves to heal. When we forgive, we break the chains of bitterness that keep us from moving forward. Forgiveness doesn't mean we forget the wrongs done to us, nor does it mean we excuse them. What forgiveness does is it releases the hold those wrongs have over our hearts. Joseph's forgiveness set him free to walk in his divine purpose. It set Asenath free from her past and allowed her to be part of something much greater than herself. And it's a lesson for us all. No matter what we've been through, no matter the hurts we've endured, forgiveness is the key that unlocks healing and transformation in our lives. As we continue to reflect on the significance of Asenath's role in God's plan, we see that her story is a testament to the truth that God's timing is always perfect. God knew exactly when to place Asenath in Joseph's life. At the moment when Joseph rose to power in Egypt, God gave him a wife. Pharaoh may have seen this marriage as a political alliance, but God saw it as the moment to weave together a story of redemption that would impact generations. Asenath's role in Israel's history may seem small in the eyes of the world, but in God's eyes, it was absolutely vital. Manasseh and Ephraim, the sons she bore, would carry forward the covenant promises made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. These sons would grow into mighty tribes in Israel, tribes that would eventually be the foundation of the northern kingdom. In our own lives, God's timing often seems mysterious. We may wonder why certain things happen at certain times, or why God hasn't answered our prayers in the way we expect. But the truth is, God's timing is perfect, and His plan is always unfolding in ways we cannot see. Just as He knew the perfect time to bring Joseph and Asenath together, He knows the perfect time to bring us into the fullness of His plan. We may not always understand what God is doing, but we can trust that He is always at work. Like Asenath, we may not see the full picture, but we can trust that God has a purpose for every step we take. The act of blessing is another key theme that we see played out in Joseph's life and in the story of Asenath. When Jacob, Joseph's father, placed his hands on Manasseh and Ephraim to bless them, he did so in a way that defied tradition. The firstborn son, Manasseh, should have received the greater blessing, but Jacob, guided by the Spirit, crossed his hands and gave the greater blessing to Ephraim. This act was not just a reversal of tradition. It was a prophetic statement about the future of Israel. Ephraim, the younger son, would become the dominant tribe in the northern kingdom, producing great leaders like Joshua. God's ways are often different from ours, and His blessings often defy human expectations. In our own lives, we may feel overlooked, or like we're not receiving the recognition we deserve. But the story of Ephraim's blessing reminds us that God doesn't operate by our standards. He doesn't choose the ones who seem most qualified in the eyes of the world. He chooses those who are willing, those whose hearts are open to His purpose. Like Ephraim, we may not always be in the spotlight, but that doesn't mean we are not chosen. God has a divine purpose for each of us, and His blessings are not bound by the world's expectations. His plans are always greater, always higher. As we reflect on Asenath's life, we are reminded that God's ways are not our ways. He often works in ways we don't expect, and He uses people we might overlook. Asenath, an Egyptian woman, was chosen to be part of the lineage of Israel's faith. God took her from the idols of Egypt and placed her at the center of His redemptive plan. She bore 2 sons who would carry the promise of God's covenant forward, shaping the future of Israel. Her story is a reminder that God's grace knows no bounds and that He can use anyone from any background to fulfill His divine purposes. Asenath's story is not just her own. It is part of a larger narrative of God's redemptive work. Her faith in Joseph's God, her forgiveness, her willingness to be a part of God's plan. These things make her story a beautiful testament to the transformative power of God's grace. She may have been a forgotten figure in the biblical narrative, but her impact is undeniable. And as we reflect on her life, we are reminded that, like Asenath, we too can be a part of God's redemptive plan, no matter where we come from or what our past holds. All it takes is faith, obedience, and a willingness to trust that God's plan for us is greater than we can ever imagine. As we come to the end of this reflection on the life of Asenath, we are reminded of the powerful message her story holds for each of us. Her life, though not given much attention in Scripture, is woven with themes of transformation, grace, and divine purpose that resonate deeply in our own lives. Asenath was a woman who started in the shadows, raised in Egypt, a land of idols and foreign gods, but God had a purpose for her that transcended her origins. God took a woman who had been a part of a pagan culture and made her the mother of 2 of the most significant tribes of Israel, Manasseh and Ephraim. This transformation speaks to the heart of God's redemptive love. It is a reminder that no one is too far from his reach. No matter our past, no matter the mistakes we've made, God's grace is sufficient. He is always willing to take what seems broken, what seems unworthy, and turn it into something beautiful, something that serves his higher purpose. Asenath's journey shows us that God can work in ways that we don't expect, uniting two worlds, two belief systems, and transforming them into a part of his greater plan. Just as Joseph rose from betrayal and hardship to become second in command in Egypt, Asenath too found herself unexpectedly placed in a position that would impact generations to come. Through her marriage to Joseph, she became part of a divine story, one that we are still learning from today. This union wasn't just about power, politics, or lineage. It was about God's divine hand at work, shaping the future of Israel. Manasseh and Ephraim were not simply sons. They were the beginning of a new chapter in God's promise to his people. They were part of the covenant God made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and through them the faith of Israel was carried forward. It is easy to overlook Asenath in the pages of the Bible, but her story is a testament to how God's plan unfolds in the most unexpected of places. Sometimes we may feel overlooked, as though our lives don't carry the significance we long for. We may feel that our past disqualifies us from God's calling, but the story of Asenath teaches us that God can redeem any situation. He can take the most unlikely people and use them to fulfill his divine purpose. God sees beyond the surface. He sees the heart, the willingness, and the potential in each of us. Just as he chose Asenath, he chooses us, no matter where we come from or what we've done. The life of Joseph offers a similar lesson: forgiveness. Joseph, betrayed by his own brothers, rose above the bitterness and hurt to forgive. He saw the bigger picture. God had been with him through all of his suffering, and that same God would continue to use him for his purposes. In forgiving his brothers, Joseph allowed God's healing to flow through his life. Asenath witnessed this grace, and perhaps it was through Joseph's example that she too was touched by God's love. It is in forgiveness that we find freedom, not just for the one who wronged us, but for ourselves. Joseph's willingness to forgive opened the door for his family's restoration, and it is this same forgiveness that God calls us to offer. But the story of Ephraim's blessing adds yet another layer of richness to this narrative. When Jacob placed his right hand on Ephraim, the younger son, instead of Manasseh, the older, he was making a prophetic statement about God's sovereignty. In the world's eyes, the firstborn son was entitled to the greater blessing. But God often works in ways that challenge our expectations. Just as God had chosen Ephraim, the younger, to be the one to lead, so he often chooses the overlooked, the underestimated, to fulfill his purposes. We may feel like Ephraim, overlooked, underestimated, passed over, but God sees us. He knows our value, and he has a plan to use us for something greater than we can imagine. As we reflect on the legacy of Asenath and her sons, we can't help but realize that we too are part of God's divine story. Our lives matter to him. Our struggles, our triumphs, our failures, and our victories are all part of his plan. Just as God used Asenath to shape the future of Israel, he can use us to shape the future of his kingdom. The question is, are we willing to trust him, even when we don't understand his plan? Are we willing to step out in faith, knowing that God will use our lives for something greater than we could ever imagine? This story isn't just about Asenath or Joseph, it's about us. It's about recognizing the ways in which God is at work in our lives, even when we can't see it. It's about trusting that God's timing is perfect, and his plans are always greater than our own. We may not always understand why things happen the way they do, but we can trust that God is weaving our story into his grand narrative of redemption. If this video has touched your heart, If it has helped you see the beauty of God's redemption in your own life, I invite you to show your support by liking, subscribing, and sharing this message. Your support allows us to continue spreading God's message of grace, forgiveness, and hope. Every comment, every share, and every like helps extend this message to someone who might need to hear it. If you feel that this content has helped bring light to your soul or given you hope during dark days, your encouragement means the world to me. Your energy fuels my work, and every bit of support you offer is cherished deeply. Whether it's a simple like or a thoughtful comment, know that it is more valuable than you may realize. Together, we are creating a space for growth, healing, and the sharing of God's love, and for that, I am eternally grateful. Thank you for being part of this journey. May you be blessed, just as Joseph and Asenath were, and may you see the incredible ways God is working in your life, even in the places where you might not expect. Remember, God has a purpose for you. He sees you, He loves you, and He is always at work, even when you can't see it. Let's continue to walk in His grace, trusting that He will use us for His glory. Thank you for your support and for being part of this incredible community. May God bless you abundantly.